Commander, we can no longer hold them. We have lost all rear support. Our intel is shot to hell. We don't even know where our own people are, let alone the damned aliens. I give us an hour before we lose access to the orbitals. This offensive is shot. We need to pull back before it's too late. The commander looked gray, grayer than normal for this damned war, and nodded. Give the orders. I want as clean a withdrawal as possible. Leave our prisoners behind. He paused and looked at his second. Make sure our men leave them alive and unharmed. Leave a few medics behind if necessary. The second hesitated, and then stopped himself from adding anything. Sir, Intel wants them and we have the room. He looked bitterly at the numbers. We have plenty of room. The commander shook his head. And then the enemy will hunt us down looking for them. Intel always wants prisoners. It gives them something to do instead of bleeding with us. If I give these bastard creatures a reason to follow our retreat, we won't make it out of the system. They will waste time recovering their people and it will buy us some time. He looked at the charts. Long enough for us to get off this hell world and fall back. Do it. The troop ships were damaged and under heavy fire as they tried to retreat, until the aliens found their captured troops, beaten, hungry, but alive. The weapons fire trailed off to near silence as they were allowed to leave, some unspoken courtesy offered for the gift. The discovery that some of the enemy medics had remained to care for their people silenced the last gun. For now. The commander pulled his men from their wrecked landers and heard silence fall as the enemy allowed him a breath, a single moment to flee. He had no illusion that it would last longer than a heartbeat before the attacks resumed. Gratitude had a very short half-life in war. Get our ships moving. Blow the orbitals once we are loaded. We don't have time to take them with us. I want everything that can move on its way out of this system in 20 minutes. I think they'll give us that as long as it is clear we are running. He could see the reluctance from his second and leaned forward. Son, this is what losing looks like. We get our people out and save what we can. He held up the battle reports. These are the glorious dead. For what? I want the bloody living and that's our job now. They'll probably shoot me for cowardice anyway, so let's do it by the numbers. Today we run. We run fast and we run clever. But don't pretend to yourself that we are not running. Execute my orders. The troops huddled in near-empty quarters. The medbays were full as the scattered fleet abandoned the battle. The soldiers looked at each other and said nothing about the empty beds, the bloodstains on the floor, the crying and the dumb silence from their comrades as they fled. Defeat is not the wailing and gnashing of teeth. It's the frozen silence, the sudden death of purpose. Its smell is rotten blood and it tastes like copper. Without the will to do more than sit and clean their weapons over and over again, the troops waited to see if they would die in the darkness instead of in the dirt. The endless silence grew longer as the fleet drew together and left the system unmolested, the burning orbitals and broken bodies the only sign of their attack. The battered collection of ships, the debris of a glorious plan and the embarrassment of its command trickled into safety. The commander watched and waited as his people were taken carefully from his ships. They were heroes after all. Everyone is a fucking hero when things go to shit. He signed his last orders and waited. Everyone but the commander. Because it had to be someone's fault and today it would be his. It didn't take long. A squad of military police making its way through his ship without a word. He supposed he should end his life right now, put a blast through his heart and save his family the embarrassment. With a grim smile, he recalled that he despised his family. Maybe they would say he fell in battle. Give his corpse a promotion and a medal. He waited. The military police were surprised to find him alive, he could tell. Their orders would have implied otherwise, and a clever captain would have made sure of it before he ever left the office. He would have shot first and written the report accordingly. He sighed to himself. This is why we have sergeants. They know how this is supposed to go. He stood and nodded. Captain, my command is yours. Follow your orders. The captain looked at him long and hard. The silence drew out. Sir, my orders stand. On a personal note, I would like to thank you for recovering my brother from that bloodbath. In fact, all of my squad had people down on that hell world, and we are grateful for your efforts, even if they didn't all make it back. The squad's eyes were all darkened with unspoken grief. The captain saluted even as his men raised their weapons. "Commander, you are charged with cowardice in the face of the enemy, abandoning your post and the willful destruction of fleet assets. You are now in my custody until a duly appointed commission is prepared." His cell was everything he expected. Dull, gray, and far from anyone he could consider an ally, except perhaps his warden. Some whisper had passed through the troops, some little quiet voice of defiance, not enough to stop plasma, but enough to give him clean water and clean food. Several times weapons had been left accessible to him, in case he wanted to end this. He was prepared to wait. Someone had left a book behind, another a journal. His guards were remarkably careless. He lay back and closed his eyes, reliving the campaign in detail, counting the dead and recalling the names. He had been summoned from some wretched meeting, trying to replace idiotic heroics with tactics and strategy. The fleet had grown beyond belief in a mad rush of nationalism and rage, a new king, and suddenly everyone was an enemy. He had repeatedly pointed out that space was infinite, that they had access to any resource you could care to mention. To control an infinite space, you needed an infinite fleet. None of that mattered. Not to a command that wanted glory. That wanted victories that showed how very clever they were, how very holy was the cause. Other people's blood spilt to make them feel significant. When the message arrived, he had expected to be dismissed. Instead, he had been promoted again and sent to kill and hopefully die, an inconvenient truth and unwanted relic of different days. He had been a soldier all his days, and so he went to war. He knew it had shocked command when he had won and kept winning. They had never trusted him, but then suddenly they needed him, as the enthusiastic amateurs got chewed up by any army that didn't listen to its own propaganda. Then the king, that spiteful little prick that he was, had wanted him gone. The victories were supposed to be his, not some upstart from the ranks. They had given him another promotion, a fleet and a suicide run. He had tried to keep the wretched wars as honest as possible, taking surrenders when he could, killing only when he had to. His habits had twisted the fleet into his own image in some strange way, his example keeping the worst of the petty misery at bay. They could pretend to hold on to their honor, even as they crushed some alien's farming world into submission. The excesses of his men were punished, the locals respected. Apparently that had annoyed the king even more. His mind exhausted itself with the memories, and finally, he found sleep. The fleet informally summoned a commission, senior officers, most of whom could read between the lines on a report. One of them looked up. "So, he is still with us? If he was going to leave, he has had more than one opportunity. He's making a point." The officer leaned back. "I believe this is what he used to tell us is a teachable moment. He wants us to listen to him." One of the younger officers, his braid still shiny, scowled. "He failed. Pass the sentence and let us move on. He's been nothing but a weight around our necks since the beginning. If he thought he would find support, he was wrong." The room temperature dropped and an older officer turned to him. "How many victories have you had? None. How many battles have you fought from your desk in intel? None. If you speak again, I will make it my personal crusade to see you fight heroically on the next dirtball our king wants. Am I clear?" From the sudden silence, he felt his point was made. "Very well. This commission is formally opened. Summon the commander and let us listen. The king has already passed the sentence. Let us look for wisdom since we cannot hope for mercy." It was a quiet knock that awoke him. So today was the day. He had no great wish to die, but he had a point or two to make. He regarded the image in the mirror with some sympathy, like a trooper that had failed an impossible task. Today he would pay all debts, and if the fools were right, he could explain to those he had sent to their deaths. The troopers were respectful, enough to get them in trouble. He whispered to the captain, "I'm sure you were issued cuffs. Your formation is wrong. Captain, don't take such risks." He had been met with a stony glance and silence. The men formed up into an honor guard as they opened the door. Shit. The commission was sitting in tense silence as they waited for the commander. For the young, it was a lesson as the older members rose and saluted. That the guards had formed an honor guard was a greater surprise. More than one officer checked that his sidearm was available. The oldest of the commission was the first to speak. He looked directly at the captain of the guard. "Captain, the commander was my teacher for many years. He will be shown no disrespect here. You may hold your guard until the bitter end. Am I clear?" The captain stiffened and then saluted. "Sir, I will be the king's hand in all things. Until then, I hold the guard." Another member of the commission, still holding the salute, responded, "The guard is yours." The captain nodded and pulled back silently, closing the door behind him and his squad. The commander looked around, his memory cataloging each of the judges. 7 had stood for his entry, 6 had remained seated. The exchange with the guard was painful to hear. The captain would be the last face he ever saw, and that would hurt the man. He could read the room. The king had taken a hand. Truth, then, since nothing else remained. He began, "If I may, I would like to access my records from the campaign. There is much you need to know." He was interrupted by the intel officer. "Prisoner, you are here to plead to the charges. This is not some show and tell. I have a full record of the events." He sat back. "Your interpretation is meaningless. You lost." The commander looked at the creature, wearing every bit of metal a non-combatant officer could carry without falling over. "You are a disgrace to the fleet, a parody of our people. You refuse to learn and we pay in blood. Shut up and learn something. I am here to die. Don't expect me to listen to your nonsense while I'm waiting." He stepped forward, suddenly a true predator. "Or you may choose combat." The intel officer fled the room, screaming for the guards. From the heavy thud that was heard from outside, they heard him. The door was closed silently. The captain held the guard. The commander nodded as the records became available. "Now, for those of you that were in my class, I won't dwell too much on the basics, but for the rest of you, it's clear that war, particularly religious or xenophobic war, will always fail. Simple math, there are many more of them than us. Space is free, stuff is free. As I taught you many years ago, you fight for advantage and nothing else. More stuff? They have stuff. Better tech? Buy it, steal it, if I might add. Going to war because your enemy has better tech is a recipe for suicide. Anyway," one of the younger commissioners hesitantly interrupted. "Forgive me, but is this evidence?" The commander nodded. "Good point. Consider this a confession. Anyway, as I was saying, our fleet was sent to rampage through local space, mostly ruining perfectly good trade relations and tourism. I was, to my regret, the one sent to do this. I'm a soldier. I go where I'm sent. A miserable excuse, but the only one all of us have." The older commissioner interrupted. "Sir, if you would, can we discuss your last campaign? I have never seen you lose. They are still out there and I need to know what to do." The commander sighed, the illusion of the classroom falling away. These men would need to hear the truth, and then he would be led to his death by an honorable man. He nodded. "The king, may the very dirt reject his bones, sent me to make war on the humans. You don't know them. They were barely in space when I arrived. Another new nation to add to his stupid uniform. There are less than 12 billion of them in the galaxy, and for that you should be grateful. 3 worlds, 3 peaceful worlds. One of my patrols mistook them for pirates and attacked. We lost. Our ships were taken. The humans seemed to be built for war, and they went looking for us since they wanted to apologize for the misunderstanding. Our king killed their ambassador and shrieked for war." He put diagrams up on the screen. "They had only 3 worlds because they didn't have FTL. We gave it to them when we attacked. Then because we are stupid, we attacked again. These creatures are war." He changed the screen. "Here was my plan for the invasion of one of their outposts. Nothing special, just another farming world. You have seen the battle reports. They massacred our people, using battle tactics I have never seen and hope to never see again. They are masters of cruelty, masters of silence. They will steal everything you hold close." He stopped. "They are honorable. Probably more than our rattled king. My fleet was allowed to leave. Allowed." He searched the faces of the commission. "Seek peace, or we will die to these people," he continued, falling back into the debriefing habits of a lifetime. The small details: secure the water supply, nearly 1,000 lost the first day. Secure the tree line, another 1,000 lost to human snipers. Touch nothing, everything is a trap. Buildings are always a trap. Small patrols often are better than large ones rarely. Everything is a bomb until you prove otherwise. They prefer to injure than kill. It costs us more. Intel is wrong all the damn time and 3 weeks behind you. A prisoner will tell you nothing but lies and will kill you if it can. They will tell the truth only when it hurts you. They don't hurt the captured, but they never truly surrender. They have better rules than us, and we needed them. The commission was still engrossed in taking notes when the door opened. The captain of the guard saluted. "Sirs, the order has arrived. The king requires the sentence to be carried out. Apparently he will be watching and he wants to go to dinner." The commander looked around him, seeing the future. These men had listened. He could leave this battlefield with hope. He raised his hand in salute, pretending not to see the tears, and turned to the captain. "At your command, Captain." The yard was as dull as his cell, gray and solid. The captain and his squad had maintained an honor guard, a petty detail that he appreciated even as the wall got closer. He had rattled off every lesson that he could remember, but he knew it would only slow down the loss, perhaps even shorten the war. If he had to die for that, well, it was worth it. He recognized the stupid silken banner of the king, his royal idiot, sending good people to die for a new shiny badge. The creature himself was probably at the bar. He reached the wall and stood to attention, trying to keep his tail still. The captain stood silent in front of him and held out a blindfold. "Sir." The commander shook his head. He preferred to die in daylight. The captain grimaced and began tying it anyway. "Captain." "Sir, shut the fuck up." He stepped back. "Squad, ready." There was a pause as his honor guard took positions. It seemed to take an age before the king took his place and they could begin firing. The new king sat uneasily on his throne. The even newer human ambassador seemed wrapped in peaceful confidence, and that was throwing him off a little. He pulled himself straight and grasped the scepter a little tighter. "You seek peace? After the butchery committed by your species? Our people stand appalled and ready to wipe your pitiful worlds from our space." The ambassador had been given her script and was ready to play the game. "Your Highness, we came to you in peace. We even tried to apologize for our difficult first contact. Your government, your late king, murdered our ambassador. We have no great hope for peace with your people now. I am here to make clear that we don't seek war, simply that it will be a pointless and wasteful exercise that we will undertake in sorrow, not anger." She looked coolly across the table. "Have you not lost enough of your best? Would you waste more of your people against us for nothing?" The king knew he sat uncertainly on his seat. His father's sudden death had thrown things into chaos, and his fleet's recent disgrace on the human hellworld had demoralized his military. Either he had a successful war or a successful peace. He needed one or the other, and the humans didn't seem to be the place for either. He showed none of this on his face. "So you offer us nothing? You are a poor excuse for a nation if you don't understand the basics of diplomacy. Perhaps we will return to your worlds and burn them down. Do you doubt our ability to do it? Shall I make the order?" The ambassador shrugged. "It is not my place to tell you what to do. I am here merely to make clear the consequences." She looked at the guard standing at the exit and added, "Although I would prefer to not die in the attempt." She rose and activated her comms. "Xeno 1 to fleet. Go." She sat down and smiled at the king. "You seem to want to play soldier, so I've called in mine." The guards began muttering even as staff began checking comms, and rapid whispering filled the room. The king sat silent, waiting for some idea of what the hell the human had done. A quiet voice came from his earpiece. "Sire, the human ambassador broadcast on a frequency beyond us. We think it's a quantum twin device. Someone must have been waiting for it." The king tried not to snort. The humans, the ones that had killed so many of his people, didn't play by anyone's rules. including those of physics, apparently. He nodded to the guards, and they raised their weapons at the human. "You will explain, quickly." Ambassador Stone had known she might pay the ultimate price for this appointment. But, if she was being honest, she liked where she sat right now. Empires rose and fell, and her people needed to find a place in the stars. "Very well. Your conquests hate you. Your army was decimated and your fleet still doesn't know much about us. We have taken and improved all the weaponry you have used against us, and we believe you are such a conservative, backwards even, society that we will defeat you. All you have is numbers and we never gave a shit about those." She punched up a map of the Empire, every conquest outlined in red. The failed invasion of the human colony was marked in black. "My people are currently ordering your occupation forces off every world that you have stolen, and since you lost your army, there is nothing that you can do about it. Then we will rearm those nations and form a free alliance with them." She leaned forward. "This is what is happening right now, and there is nothing you or your people can do that will stop it." She sat back. "The only question is, what happens next? And that is up to you. Total war or treaty?" The king slammed the scepter into the table. "Enough, human! You spout nonsense like a child. Our worlds are guarded and nothing you have can change that. You are here to seek war, and war you will find. The previous king was wrong to kill your ambassador, and for that, I am willing to allow you to leave here safely. I am prepared to issue orders against your worlds should this fleet of yours threaten us. Leave us." Ambassador Stone looked around her. The battle flags, the heavy stone walls, the silent serfs lining the walls. She bowed towards the king and removed her comms, placing it on the table. "I am the final ambassador you will ever receive from Earth. Continue this war against us, and I will stand amongst the rubble of this throne room, and we will welcome your people to find peace with us in whatever remains of your empire. One day you will need this." She pushed the comms across to the king and bowed. She turned and left, praying silently that she had played this right. She let out her breath as the doors opened, and her human guards were waiting. She nodded to her crew. "All right, Code 26, go." Code 26 meant every fucking letter. I don't have time to break it down. We're running. "Sergeant, this dropship stuff seems a little, well, nuts if I had to be honest. It looks like a soap dispenser powered by a toilet brush." The trooper squashed himself uneasily into the tin can hanging off the side of the ship. The sergeant smiled with false confidence. "Son, that toilet brush will slow you down as you land, and this is a soap dispenser. We just scaled it up. Good luck, Greenie." The sergeant hit the launch button and the door slammed closed. It was immediately released to hurl itself towards the planet's surface. In local space, the burning remains of Empire ships and satellites were falling towards their nearest gravity well, even as the Marines dropped. Since this was a big day everywhere, there was less than 1,000 actual working soldiers. Intech was measuring everything from ammo cost to band-aids and would no doubt not fuck up at all. The 1,000 men currently falling through an alien atmosphere and untried technology to invade an unknown world were suitably cheerful about their mission. The soldier's prayer, known and honored throughout the ages, is really, really simple, and they recited it to themselves. "Oh God, let this fucking thing land. Christ, get me out of here safe. Fucking amen." Outside, the toilet brush spun up and each capsule slowed to landing speed, staying in a formation designed by 100 years of military drone practice. The target was the main occupation hub and the Imperial government complex. 8 minutes of terror later, the capsules landed and command was back online. "Assemble and begin the offensive. Ground support is on the way. It's harder to move artillery, so give it 80 minutes. Orbital fire is operational and available. Hubs will be up once you clear the ground. Locals are assumed friendly or ignorant. You have profiles on the enemy. If it shoots, kill it. I want their HQ dead and the government buildings on fire. A big fire. Go all squads." The Marine commander cut comms. It was nothing he hadn't said to the men before, but right now he was part of the greatest experiment in human history. The aliens' attacks had been so stupid, so poorly organized, that a bunch of tired farmers had kicked them off their brand new colony. Mankind was gambling that they weren't fast learners, and had split their forces into fucking shrapnel. There were 1,000 missions like his right now, and this was a one-shot deal. He focused on securing the system and setting up his satellites. The men on the ground would have to hold the planet. Ambassador Stone leaned back against the door after it had finally slid shut, and let out a deep breath. She was alive anyway, so she was one up on the last poor bastard to try this. Walking across her cabin, she kicked off her shoes and prepared herself for the onslaught. The comms officer had given her a nod and 10 minutes to prepare. The coffee was waiting on her desk, as was a suspiciously golden liquid that she suspected was for if things had gone poorly. The fact that humanity was up to something wasn't a surprise, but regardless of what their king may have thought, she had no idea of the details. Her job had been to measure the room and call it. The Empire was weak and the new king didn't know what to do next, then get out alive. She sighed and poured the golden liquid into her coffee, even as 1,000 calls began arriving on her screen. Lieutenant Abrams squatted in the bush, surrounded by his men. From the mild muttering he could hear from the squatties, they hated the smell as much as he did. The broken leaf-type things had released a pungent scent that reminded him of an incontinent cat. His mask muffled the scent, but he could feel it soak into his gear, a taste that would follow him around forever. He checked the scanner again and nodded to his sergeant and calmed the troops. "All right, we are exactly where we are supposed to be. A column of the enemy militia is marching towards us like they think they're indestructible, so let's point out their mistake. Wait for my order before firing unless they spot you. I need a good visual before we smash them." He watched his men settle into near invisibility around him, using nothing but the local vegetation and solid training. He moved to the very back of the ambush and waited, watching the road and hoping what little intel had been provided was correct. The column of militia seemed to slow down, obviously spooked by something. Abrams watched as someone, an officer he guessed, moved to the front. Not a great start. High Officer Metallan of the Lennox militia sniffed the air and ordered the men to a half-march. Something on this cursed planet had disturbed the Rizik trees, disgusting plants that served as the basis of most of what passed for cuisine around here. His men had been forced to eat it for months now, starved of the proper rations from their own homeworld. He had tried to explain to the Ingram HQ that hungry and pissed-off soldiers weren't a good idea. But who the fuck listens to a militia officer? Still, best be cautious when someone, and nobody had bothered to tell him who, seemed to be attacking. He turned to his lower officer and nodded. "Get the men ready. We might have to search the fields." That was met with a groan. That was the sort of order that could make a man very unpopular. "Sir." Lieutenant Abrams sent a coded signal to the command center that was still sitting in orbit, waiting for him to do his job. He had identified the species that made up the militia and confirmed that they were natives of Xeno Target 17, currently another active combat zone. Well, time to see if his theories paid off. He stepped out of hiding and onto the road, keeping his weapon at rest and hoping the enemy wasn't trigger-happy. He heard unhappy muttering on comms until abrupt silence told him the sergeants had got to work. Metallan was astonished to see an alien step out onto the road some 30 meters ahead of him. It was tall and dressed in some gray-green uniform. It was obviously armed and aware of his men. Suicidal? Stupid? As he watched, the creature took off its mask. He raised his field scanner and focused on the creature. It was warm-bodied and either very angry or hated the smell as much as he did. It was pale, spindly. Not any species that he recognized, but he would be the first to admit he was ignorant of much of the galaxy. Had the Ingram sent a new militia without telling him, or was this the enemy he had been sent to search for? Without orders, the men had raised their weapons and waited for the order to fire. He raised his hand and ordered them to stay calm. It seemed to want to talk, and that suited him fine. He was no friend to the Ingram, and had no particular wish to join in with their pointless wars any more than he had to. He walked forward, leaving his plasma rifle with an unhappy aide. Abrams was feeling the tension, unhappily standing right in the guns of an uncontacted enemy. He pulled off his mask, aware that it was a little intimidating to civilians and Xenos. God, the smell filled the world. The enemy seemed confused, which to be fair was understandable. now to see if this was going to play out as he hoped. After some delay, the obvious leader handed his weapon to another soldier and walked forward on his own. First contact seemed to be happening, so he released the tense breath he had been holding, and then immediately regretted the deep inhalation of the putrid smell that followed. Idly, he thought that this place must never get tourists. The human stood still as the alien approached. Both of them were gathering impressions, already drafting the reports that they would need to write regardless of how this played out. Abrams saw that the alien was shorter than him. Its uniform was a lot shinier than his. Obviously, they didn't do camo. It didn't seem to need a mask, which made sense, he supposed. The Ingram Empire conscripted from compatible worlds, giving them a useful military and a large number of hostages should anyone step out of line. It reminded him of the Roman Empire, a creation that had survived for nearly 2,000 years. He hated that he might have to kill them all. His men would already have worked out how. They were just waiting to see what happened to him. It never occurred to him that they could lose, and he was probably right.